So welcome everybody to the Lineage Collection's Cabernet Franc exploration. If you have been a member of the Lineage Collection of Stephen Kent Winery for any longer than 3.5 minutes, you know how passionate we all are here from a production standpoint with Cabernet Franc. How amazing a variety it is. How much we love making it, how much we love the different expressions that we're getting with the variety. And we're going to talk about those today. This is not a blending seminar. This is not a blending session necessarily. But if you want to go ahead and play around with blends, feel free. This is your get-together. We're going to talk about Cabernet Franc in terms of vintage and in terms of vineyard as some of the contexts, but we'll also talk about it with respect to other growing areas, other producers in Livermore, what we believe the future to be in Livermore. Before I go too much further, for those who don't know, I'm Stephen. Welcome. One of the winemakers for the Lineage Collection. To my left, Aiden Mirasu, 7th generation of the Mirasu family in the wine business. Say hello to Aiden, everybody.
Hi, guys.
And then on my right, Beth Refsnyder, adopted 7th generation member of the Mirasu family, who is our production assistant winemaker. The three of us are the winemaking team. And whatever comes out of the cellar and goes in a bottle that you're hopefully enjoying is because the three of us really believe in what it is that we're doing. We really believe in trying to create beauty from wine, trying to enrich people's lives, trying to make, especially days like we're experiencing over the last 6 months, just a little bit better, a little bit lighter, a little bit more delicious. So we really are happy you're here. Thank you so much for being part of what we're doing. And by all means, please, though we have some technical challenges right now, it's 2020. What do you expect, for many sakes? Please ask questions. Please make comments, and we'll make sure we answer as many as we possibly can. The chat button also works well. Nancy will be translating the chats so that we can read them and respond. So feel free to comment and ask questions. So we sent off a PowerPoint for you, the future of Cabernet Franc, the Lineage Collection. Hopefully you had a chance to look at that or print it out, and we'll be referring to that a little bit as we talk also, and hopefully it's something that will add a little bit more information to your Cabernet Franc exploration tonight and down the road as you think more and think more about Cabernet Franc and drink more Cab Franc. A lot of what's happening in Livermore right now is sort of incipient, nascent in terms of Cabernet Franc. Cabernet Franc is a variety that grows well in a number of places, perhaps not as great a quality on the upper end as Cabernet Sauvignon in as many places. The Loire Valley in the north central part of France is really the home to 100% Cabernet Franc wines. Saumur, Chinon, Bourgogne are all appellations whose only grape, red grape anyway, is Cabernet Franc. In Bordeaux, Cabernet Francs are blended wines, especially on the right bank. So if you know properties like Chateau Lauzon or Angelus or a variety of other Premier Grand Crus, those are Cabernet Franc and Merlot blends. So you don't get pure Cabernet Franc from Bordeaux. We are playing around with blends that we'll talk about a little bit later with the new project that we have. But we are looking to express Cabernet Franc as often as possible as 100% variety because of how singular a grape it is and how relatively transparent it is compared to Cabernet Sauvignon. So the more that you blend with it, the more that you're taking away from the from the pure Cabernet Francness of the Cabernet Franc that we're trying to produce, if that makes any sense at all. So just so I can give myself a little bit of a break here and mentally reset, I'm going to take a sip of the 17 Cabernet Franc. Go ahead and take a sip of the 17 Cab Franc as well, and then we'll talk a little bit more about this wine and Cab Franc in the Valley. I feel better now. I feel more connected to the center of things. Yes, guys?
Yeah. Everything is right in the universe.
Yeah, everything's right in the universe.
I like it.
Stephen, this is John and Betsy. We just tasted it. It's wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Thank you. If you would do us a favor, we're curious about our audience, our friends. If you are outside of California, give a little chat, hit your chat box and tell us where you're joining us from right now. So we kind of see how many folks we have from the East Coast or from the Southeast. If you are from outside the Tri-Valley, let us know where in California you are as well, just so we get a sense of how far the reach of Livermore Cab Franc goes at this point in time. So the future of Cabernet Franc is extremely important to us as winemakers and to our group that's in this room, that of whom you can't see at the moment, who are part of our marketing team and part of our sales team, part of our social media and communications team. Everyone who works at the Lineage Collection believes strongly in Cabernet Franc as a variety.
It's a requirement.
Yeah.
I think that's the first question we ask people, right? On a scale of 1 million to 1,000,001, how much do you love Cab Franc? So part of the reason why I love Cabernet Franc so much is because we've had success with Cab Franc in Livermore from 2006 when we made our first vintage from Gilnetti Vineyard through the 2017 and soon to be released 18 vintage early in the year, early in 2021. And with success comes enthusiasm, and with enthusiasm comes a greater desire to continue to experiment with those things that you seem to have had success with. We have people from New York City, from Connecticut, North Carolina, Wyoming. Awesome. Thank you so much. Welcome, guys. We wish we could all shove you into this room here with us.
No, we don't. For everyone's sake.
Under normal circumstances. We will do that at some point in the future. So we're always looking for ways to express as purely as possible from a winemaking standpoint. Again, those things that are most important to us, which are beauty and elegance, wines that are emotionally connective and connecting, wines that spark a conversation, wines that change people's perspectives about what's possible from a variety or what's possible from a grape growing region, from a producer, that sort of thing. And I love things that taste and feel sort of, I was going to say on the fringe. I don't mean that exactly, but that make me think again about what it is I'm tasting and experiencing. As you probably know as well, if you've been a member of ours or followed what we do, the texture of wines is extremely important. Beth can talk about that as well, about how when we're making blends, we're talking about lineage, when we're tasting barrel after barrel, what it is we kind of settle on in terms of barrels that get included into blends and not. Usually are texturally related characteristics.
Yeah, a lot of the, when we're going through all of our blending, We'll talk about the aroma, we'll talk about the flavor, and those are very small differences. They can be quite varied actually, but usually if a wine is varietally correct, we're kind of picking up the same, handful of descriptors, but it always kind of comes down to what excites you as far as a texture. Is it rich? Does the acid kind of punch you in the face and wake you up and make you think about something, and you don't need coffee because it just wakes you up? We're constantly kind of talking about the texture of different barrels, and barrels can be very different texture-wise, depending on a new barrel or an old barrel, and wine also, even if they're exactly the same barrel from the same year, or same cooper from the same year, they can also be very, very different. So yeah, texture is a huge thing for us, and Cab Franc has a really, really awesome texture, especially compared to Cabernet Sauvignon, which tends to be a little richer, a little more tannic. But Cabernet Franc, as far as the acidity goes, we're all could use Steven's key phrase. I don't know if we're allowed to say that on Zoom.
No.
But we all love wines that have a nice acid zing to them.
We can we're all acid whores. We can absolutely say that on Zoom.
Okay.
But-
I wanted to make sure I didn't say
Yes.
it. He said it.
But to Beth's point, which is an interesting thing to think about in the context of blending, we try lots separately when we're doing lineage blending just by variety, and then when we have, and this is all blind at those points. And then we go back and kind of try and layer things on top of each other. When you're tasting through a single barrel, it makes less sense to consider the individual flavor characteristics of that barrel and how it will contribute to the overall blend. Because when they're all together, who knows how much of what that single barrel tastes like is when it translates to what the overall blend is. It's easier to pick out, the texture and those other characteristics and see how that would push the wine overall toward a certain direction when you're talking about acidity or tan or something like that. So that's why I think that it's so important in the overall blending thought process.
I agree, and we'll talk a little bit more about this in a minute. And one of the reasons, from a practical standpoint, why texture is so important is because it's really the one characteristic or set of characteristics that we have the most control over as winemakers. We have the ability to shepherd the texture of the wine along from the crush pad when you have just juice to the final product that you open up in your house. And to Beth's point, we've been working with vineyards for quite a while, the same set of vineyards, of world-class vineyards, and we use a not a small, but a somewhat limited number of coopers in our barrel program, and we have a pretty good idea about what the flavors and aromas of those barrels are going to be and what the varieties from Gilmedi Vineyard or Sockau are going to taste like. It's the ability to shepherd acidity and shepherd tannin and shepherd richness from the point of the crush pad, which I think is sort of the most important tools of the trade as far as winemakers are concerned. And we'll talk more about that when we get into the individual vineyard wines and vintage wines. But if you have your PowerPoint with you, go ahead and refer to the second page. It's called Cabernet Franc Future. And I just want to kind of set a context for everybody about what it is that we believe Livermore Valley ought to be down the road. Livermore, as you all know, one of the oldest wine growing regions in California. What you may not realize is how small it is. There are only about 2,000 acres under vine in Livermore. We have about the same acreage under vine in Livermore now as we did when Prohibition hit, which is an interesting and not altogether positive development. Napa has 55,000 acres of grape under vine, acres of dirt under vine. Lodi has about 100,000. Monterey County has about 100,000. We have 2,000 acres in Livermore, and we see more vineyard acreage being taken out right now than we see being put into the ground. That's not a good thing for a wine region, for a wine region's vitality, for its growth, for its ability to be the deliverer of raw product to the next generation of winemakers. It's not a great development for people who live in wine country and want to live in wine country. You have to have a viable vineyard environment, just like you need to have a viable and active and enthusiastic winemaking community for things to grow and to move forward. One of the goals that I have as sort of someone putting together a quality alliance for winemakers in Livermore and looking at trying to bring investors into Livermore to buy acreage and plant more grapes. And Alameda County is a very enthusiastic participant in growing its wine country. It's not like Napa or certain parts of Sonoma where you can't find dirt to buy. You can't find vineyard. And even if you could find raw dirt, the county won't let you plant more vineyard in certain places. But our goal over the next 10 years will be to see our growth from, I'm going to say something like, call it maybe 25, maybe 30 acres of Cabernet Franc in Livermore to 2,000 acres of Cab Franc in Livermore. We believe that if we can get to about 10,000 acres of planted vineyard in Livermore, we've got a very viable, very enthusiastic wine production environment. And that would also then kind of spread its spokes out from that hub to an enthusiastic wine audience and a growing wine audience that sees the value of what we're doing here in the Valley. Okay, go ahead and share it now, please. We're going to go ahead and share this page with you in case you don't have the PowerPoint in front of you. Just so you can kind of see what we're talking about. And while Matt's doing that, I'm going to have another sip of wine. Next page, I think, Matt. One page before that. Or maybe we just, okay, you know what? I may have gotten a copy that had the pages out of order here. So look on, if you don't see it on the second page, look on the last page. It's just called Cabernet Franc Future. And so we're looking at making sure that we have diversity of fruit. Going down, I think it's all the way at the end. We have multiple clones. We have Loire Valley clones. We have Bordeaux clones. We have Livermore Valley all the way at the end. We have Livermore Valley as the hub for Cabernet Franc production. There we go, right there. And we're seeing sort of a worldwide recognition for Cabernet Franc in Livermore Valley. Livermore is the place in California, and by virtue of being from California, it's the place in the U.S. that is the Cabernet Franc hub for the grape. And this is going to require a lot of attention and effort and focus, but it's something that we believe that we can actually do. And then at the very bottom, we'll talk about this toward the end, L'Autre Côte is a new project that we're going to be introducing a little bit later in the year. Looking at L'Autre Côte as one of the finest Cabernet Franc wines in the world. So that's kind of what we believe that we can accomplish here. It's what we're going to be spending a lot of production, energy, and time and thought on. And it's a very exciting place to be. We're never going to out Cabernet Sauvignon Napa Valley. We make world-class cab, as you all know. We believe strongly in what Livermore Valley does from a Cabernet Sauvignon perspective. And if we want to be a wine growing region that has something distinctive to say, then we need to be looking at other varieties that grow especially well here. We'll talk more about that as we go along in the program. All right, so what we try to accomplish here, and these are in the first couple of pages of your handout, going back up to the top, is we're always looking at what our purpose is as a wine company. We're always looking at the Lineage Collection as a hospitality organization and what it is we're doing from, thank you, for one up. What we're doing from the standpoint of taking care of people. And you know, as I've said before many times, we're not a wine company as much as we're a hospitality company. We believe strongly in the goal of taking care of people, the goal of making life a little bit easier, of adding deliciousness to people's lives. And from that perspective, our goals are always about how you're feeling, how you perceive that you're being taken care of by our folks. And at the same time, we want to create experiences for you that are perspective altering, that you look and say to yourself, holy cow, I didn't know that Livermore could do that. I didn't know the wines could be as good as that. I didn't know the wines could be as fine and as delicious. Or the hospitality experiences, the events that we do, the Zoom tastings, minus the technological challenges. Those are all things that we're looking to accomplish as hospitality folks. And these kinds of thoughts underpin everything that it is that we do. So we appreciate so much that you're part of who we are, part of our DNA, and we're always looking for folks to help us along by offering suggestions to things that you'd like to experience, events that you'd like to attend. Camera. So we will allude to this handout as we go along, and you can follow along with this as well. So thank you for that, guys. Aiden, do you want to talk about Gilmedi Vineyard and Sockau Vineyard in terms of sort of your overall sense of how the vineyards differ, how the wines that come from the sites differ?
You've spent a lot more time actually around Sockau than I have, so I can definitely talk about what the differences we see are when blending, but in terms of the actual differences in the vineyard geography, I think
Just more about the wines. I mean, what's your overall sense of how Sockau and Gilmedi differ just in terms of their interpretation through the wines? And I'll talk about what I think from a vineyard standpoint makes those differences.
Just like, I guess, general impressions of both vineyards. For me, Sockau has, I think, crept in as a more significant portion of the Cab Franc, portion of the lineage blends over time. So that's definitely one thing. Sockau, to me, tends to be a little bit lighter and less tannic than the Gilmedi counterpart. Generally, when I do the single barrel tastings with them blind. But beyond that, I think it differs for all of us, I would say.
Beth, do you have anything you want to add to that?
This is one of my favorite things about winemaking, because we don't always agree on everything.
No, I know that.
And this is why we end up with really, really great blends, is because we don't all have the same palate and we all taste things differently. And the thing to say about this as well is that this changes from vintage to vintage, which you'll see in your kit as well. The last couple of vintages of Sockau, to me, have been a little bit more robust than the Gilmedi. Gilmedi has a really, really distinctive flavor profile to me that I just taste year after year. And the Gilmedi has a handful of flavors that really excite me and are very different and kind of remind me a little bit of some of the Cab Francs that come from France, which is always very exciting. I think as far as the 2018s go, and I know you guys have all of these in front of you, and it's always really fun to pull barrel samples of these, but as far as the 2018 goes, I'd be curious to see if you guys agree or not, but the Sockau to me has a little bit more richness as far as structure goes. And once again, tell me what you guys think as far as that goes, because This is exactly how it works when we talk about wines. Is we go, well, I think this has this and this has this, but it's 2017 and 2018 as far as Sockeye went. There's just a richness mid palate that really kind of sets that wine apart, and I think is part of the reason why it's kind of crept into lineage a little bit more.
Stephen, this is John. I have a question for you.
Please.
It says on your vineyard comparisons that the acreage on Gilmedi is 3.73 acres and Sakau is 6.10, but on the reverse sheet, it says Gilmedi produces 6,858 tons and Sakau produces 1,382.
There's a decimal place there. So it's 6.858 and 1.382.
Ah,
So those, let me explain those numbers. So Gilmedi Vineyard is approximately 65 acres of vines, planted to 10 or 11 different grapes. There's only one block of Cab Franc planted at Gilmedi at this point in time, and it's 3.73 acres. Sockau Vineyard, by comparison, is about 200 acres and only has the Bordeaux varieties planted. So there's no Syrah, there's no Petit Syrah, Grenache, Sauvignon Blanc like we have at Gilmedi. But the block of Cabernet Franc there is double the size that we have at Gilmedi. And because we've used Gilmedi Vineyard so much longer than we've used Sockau, we were taking practically all of the Cab Franc that was planted at Gilmedi, we were using for our program. We sold a little bit to other wineries. And our movement into Sockau Vineyard has been very recent. 2016 is the first vintage we got fruit, Cabernet, Sauvignon, and Franc from Sockau. We will see more Cab Franc coming from Sockau this year compared to last year, more than double in fact. And we'll see more and more coming from Sockau as our program grows. So the vineyard comparison chart that I put together is really just a very kind of macro way of looking at the two sites and looking at what we have historically done from these sites. But as we've noted, we've been using fruit from Gilmedi for 10 years longer than we've been using Sockau. There is a comment. Yeah, so we get a comment from Debbie. We taste more sweet and heavy from in Sockau from Gilmedi is how I interpret this. Huge bell pepper aroma on Gilmedi,
Especially the 18.
Especially the 18.
It's very, very distinctive.
So bell pepper is an interesting term. I tend to use the phrase herbal. And one of the things that we did from a winemaking standpoint in 18 versus 19 is, with Gilmedi versus Sockau is that we aged the wine in puncheons. A puncheon is a 500-liter barrel. A normal barrique, the barrels that you know, are 225 or 228 liters. So they're less than half the size of a puncheon. The bigger the vessel, the less impactful the wood is, especially if it's an older puncheon, as these are. So you're getting more of that just beautiful, pure fruit and pure herbal characteristic, which is very prevalent in Cabernet Franc, in the 18 Gilmedi than you are in the 18 Sockau. I tend to look at those aromas as being more, hopefully anyway, more like sage and bay leaf, but also I think we've gotten, at least I've gotten this, we talked about this over the last couple of years.
It's my favorite descriptor.
These dried chilies, these sort of ancho chilies, not the fresh jalapeno cat pea thing you get from Sauvignon Blanc, but the more roasted kind of chilies that you would get, that you get usually as a powdered form for cooking, but that I get, and I think that we all three of us get, as a very characteristic note in Cabernet Franc.
That's one of my favorite things about Gilmetti as well, is that I always get, when I was talking about that earlier, I always get this kind of roasted pepper, a little bit of like adobo, like cumin type of spices, and I just love that in a wine. It's intriguing to me, it's interesting, and we talk sometimes about Cabernet Franc as having like a herbal, or some people say bell pepper, and for us we kind of get it a little bit more as the savory quality for Gilmetti, and it's one of my favorite things about Cab Franc that we get from Gilmetti.
It makes a very interesting pen hat. I know that many people have never had to experience that, but
had to experience. I infer
that's a negative.
from that.
That's a
When
negative
I think
implication.
it's a fascinating thing, and maybe someday we'll do that. But I don't know that we really want to go down that road. Is Jeff Marsh? Do you have a question, Jeff?
Jeff Marsh is asking, how will increasing temperatures due climate change cause the mix of varieties planted in Livermore change over time?
That's a great question, Jeff. So if you didn't hear that, Jeff's asking about how the effects of climate change, how might that affect what it is that we're doing here in Livermore from a wine growing standpoint. It's a really great question, and part of why I believe so strongly in Cabernet Franc here in Livermore. Global warming is not a one-size-fits-all phenomenon. Not every place grows by the same number of degrees centigrade or Fahrenheit as every other place at the same time. There are a lot of microclimatic effects that we see here in Livermore as temperatures rise that will actually have more effect on the future of what it is that we're doing here, what it is we're able to grow. Esther Mobley, who writes for the San Francisco Chronicle about wine, wrote an article about whether there's going to be Cabernet, whether Napa will be a Cabernet growing appellation 30 years from now. And there are a lot of scientists who believe that it could be problematic. What we're finding, one of the major climatic effects here in the valley is the amount of air, the cold air that comes in to Livermore practically every afternoon. That is an effect that's caused by the temperatures on the other side of the Altamont Pass. As it gets hotter on the other side of the Altamont Pass, Tracy, Stockton, Modesto, Manteca, it serves as a vacuum that pulls in this cold air from San Francisco, from the bay. As it gets warmer, the way I'm feeling it and looking at it, and the way that I look at harvest states and the like, is that we're pulling in cooler air earlier in the day than we used to. What the effect is, vines don't like wind. So the vines shut down earlier in the day because they're protecting themselves. They close their little microscopic holes, their stoma, so they don't lose moisture. They protect themselves. They don't photosynthesize anymore for that day. So they're not ripening fruit any longer for that day. It takes longer for us to get to a point of ripeness than it used to. Our growing season is getting longer and longer and longer. So all of these different ripening arcs, sugar, total acid, skins and seeds, begin to move more in lockstep with each other rather than sugar just sort of running rampant ahead of everything else.
It comes from time.
As our growing season lengthens, it means, in my mind, that the varieties like Cab Franc that do well in cooler climates begin to do better in Livermore than they would do in Napa, where you don't get the same kind of effect. So I see global warming actually as helping our efforts to grow Cabernet Franc than to dissuade us from growing Cab Franc. So I hope that gives you a little bit of insight. I'm trying to read this board, and I'm Robin Julie Diesler, blended 50-50 Gilmetti and Sacco 2018 vintage, and described it as tasty.
Good job, winemakers.
Thank you, guys. We may have a spot open here. I'm getting tired, as you can tell. So thanks for playing along. That's part of what makes it such a fascinating business. Did Mr. Dwyer have a question that he wanted to ask?
No question. It was a comment.
Please.
The 2018 Sacco is amazing. It serves well on its own. It's very silky and sophisticated and finishes velvety and sweet in a way, but very nicely done.
Thank you so much. Glad you enjoyed that. To me, the 18, and I don't know how you think about this, Aiden and Beth, the 18 Sockau to me is significantly riper tasting, just from a flavor standpoint, than the 18 Gilmetti. I'm not getting as much of that characteristic kind of herbal quality. I do get a little bit of that kind of adobo spiciness on the finish, but I do get a little bit more roundness in the
Okay.
You have the same kind of acid drive as the 18 Gilmetti does. But
It's too late.
look at blending those components into a wine-like lineage, where we generally use both of the vineyards when we can. Just to kind of give you a context, since the 16 vintage, we only got like 3 barrels worth of Sockau Cab Franc versus 10, 12, 14 barrels of Gilmetti. So when we're looking at putting together the BDX blend or the small lot offering of Cab Franc, which is generally a blend of the 2 vineyards, there's not a lot of that wine of the Sockau vineyard to go into the lineage blend. So most of, just from a volume standpoint, more Gilmetti Cab Franc goes into lineage than Sockau at this point in time. But again, as we harvest more fruit from that site, we'll get a chance to do more experimentation in the cellar with fermentation techniques and various things like that will hopefully continue to add complexity to what it is we're doing and increase that as we go along. Anybody else have any comments or questions?
Yes, Stephen,
Yes.
can you hear me? I chatted, I'm not sure it came through, but my impression is that, I don't know why, but the Satchu 18 seems closer to being released. It's more approachable right now. It's velvety, it's sexy, but the Gilmetti, I don't know, maybe it's got a little more tannin in it. It's not as appealing right now, but I have a feeling in 5 years, I'd rather be drinking the Gilmetti.
Tom, that's a great observation. Do you have a comment on that, Beth?
There's a couple things with that, and it's been cool to. One of my favorite parts about my job is just getting to taste barrels wines in barrels as they change. And this 2018 Sockau has changed so much in the last 6 months for the better. We had a tasting quite a while ago with other winemakers in Livermore, tasting through Cab Francs, and it wasn't my favorite. And we do it blind, so we don't know it. We kind of have ideas sometimes, but I'm really happy with how this is tasting now. I agree with you that the Sockau tends to be a little more approachable right now, and that the Gilmetti just has so much time to age. It's just going to mellow out. It's going to kind of, all of those different flavors that you're getting are going to kind of fuse together and become more cohesive and structure-wise as well. It's a little angular at times right now to me, but I've seen how this wine ages, and it's just a great aging wine.
What? Yes, I agree, and I agree with what Tom was saying about there being more tannin on the finish of the 18 Gilmetti than the Sockau, and that would I would think help it age better. But not just that, I feel like there's more acid right in the middle of the Gilmetti as well, which is going to help it age.
And that's that. And I'm glad you made that point because it was something that I was going to say as well. I think that the 18 Gilmetti Cab Franc is more familiar to me as a Stephen Kent Cabernet Franc wine at this point in time because of that acid drive. The wine to me isn't as rich through the mid palate as the 18 Sockau. The 18 Sockau has beautiful, rich roundness to it. The 18 Gilmetti to me is a little bit more compelling wine right now because of that acid drive, because of the way that it delivers flavors, the way that it persists in my mouth, that texture again that we talked about earlier. I think that the appropriate mix of tannin, an appropriate blend, proportion of tannin and acid is what allows a wine to age well. All wines can age. not all wines ought to age. And so if there's a subset of wines, they all age. Some age well. The wines that age beautifully and the wines that are going to be immensely compelling, memorable wines down the road are those wines that have acidity and tannin in the right proportion, that you just have something that still appears to be fresh in the mouth even 10, 15 years down the road. There's nothing worse than having a wine that's got zero fruit and a huge amount of tannin, and you're expecting 10 years down the road to have this wine be a real drinkable thing, and it's not because there's no fruit left over. Who wants a wine like that? In my mind, that's a style of wine that doesn't appeal. I think there's enough acidity in Sakau to run that gamut of time as well very successfully, which is a little bit of a different kind of a texture at the end of the day. But great, I think a good observation, folks who are seeing those differences in terms of acid and tannin and overall heft, mid-palate to finish in these wines. Comment.
John and Bree Silvera, and that's what makes wine great, because to us, the extra tannins in Gilmedi make it much better to us right now. We find Sakau a little softer than we like.
Yeah, right. I mean, it's sort of the, that's what makes a horse race, right? Is you get differences in style, you get differences in texture. What we hope to accomplish with these wines over time, and the longer we work with Sakau and with Gilmedi for that matter, I mean, we certainly never know everything. Part of what makes this job so much fun is that we're learning stuff constantly about the vineyards we're working with, about ourselves as our palates change. My palate has changed dramatically in the 25 years I've been doing this. I would never have worn an acid horse shirt 10 years ago. Now my wardrobe is only acid horse shirt.
You did today.
My desire for acidity and for freshness is much more prevalent in the wines that we make and the wines that I like to drink now than they used to be. That might change again. It all kind of depends upon a context, depends upon sort of a time in your life and what it is that you're enjoying in a given moment in your life. And what we're trying to explore, like we have explored with our single vineyard Cabernet program, is all of the beautiful facets of Cabernet Franc that we get from different clonal material and different vineyards. Every vineyard we work with produces different fruit. And we are trying to let the vineyard speak through by being shepherds. We're shepherds. We're helping the wines sort of become, to reach their apotheosis without too much meddling and intervention from the winemaking team. When we're working on our single vineyard Cabernet program, we're looking at making having as few variables as possible in terms of yeast and barrels and that sort of thing, so that the site really does show through. Gilmedi is different than Sakau, different than Lencioni, different than Smith, different than Casa de Viñas.
And 18 different than 19, which is different than 17.
Each vintage tells its own story. It writes a chapter in the wine book that is the Mirasu family, that is the wine book, that is the lineage collection. And it's important to us to constantly be providing something to you that is affirming of quality, affirming of varietal correctness, but also affirming of joy and affirming of deliciousness and beauty and elegance and balance. All of these things that we're attempting to accomplish with each wine, each vintage. So, bless you. Thank you for that comment.
And that's kind of one of my favorite things as well, as far as the style we do winemaking and where it's trying to let the vineyard speak for itself. Is we're always going to get people who like one versus they like the other, and for totally different reasons. And we'd love to be able to offer that. That now people know. Well, I tend to like the characteristics of Sakau a little better, or I love that racy acidity and chili pepper of Gilmedi. And the more we do this, and the more we discover not only in Livermore but maybe other places for Cabernet Franc as well, we're looking forward to kind of helping everybody discover what they love about Cab Franc and where they love to get Cab Franc from.
Exactly, that's a great point. we talk, do we have to, Suzanne?
The burning
Suzanne,
question at
Since
this
the
point.
burning
No
question
pun
is,
intended.
Suzanne asks a question about smoke in 2028. You want to tackle that one?
I can start.
Because I'll cry.
I know, don't
cry.
cry. He's being overly negative. Actually, we're all kind of in the middle of figuring out what the true impact of that is going to be. You know, as these climate events get more dramatic and more frequent, we're going to have more data and experience to work with. And as old as the winemaking industry is, it's actually kind of limited, really, what past effects have been major fire years and stuff like that. So what we've been doing as a wine region, Livermore, we've been trying to do as many micro ferments as we can. So picking things from blocks and doing like small batch ferments on them, because that's when you're going to be able to really see the real impact of the smoke is after fermentation's over, which is obviously problematic because, you know, you're testing these on wines that are not quite ripe. And then all these wineries, not just us, obviously, are dealing with this, sending in samples to be tested to find out and get back, you know, information that they can work with. That's all been challenging for all of us. Do you have any update on where we're at? As of right now, we're still.
I can put some numbers to this.
Yeah.
We winemakers in Livermore in 2017 and 2018, you know, watched in horror, along with the rest of California, at the fires that were happening in Sonoma County and in Napa County, and commiserating with our fellow winemakers, because it you know, there's nothing you can really do about smoke taint or if that does affect your region, if you're making fine wine and small batch wine. The short answer, and I was interviewed on NBC News the other morning about this very question, and it was, we don't know yet. Actually, you know, I wanted to take a picture, and I had a caption already for Instagram for this sort of, the mundane becomes the miraculous. It was going to be a blue sky, because we actually had blue sky today for the first time in weeks, which is a great sign that from looking out the window, I can actually see the hills relatively clearly. So hopefully over the course of the next week or so, we'll see a lot of this stuff blow out. But smoke is a physical thing, right? It fine particulate, microscopic sized particles that get absorbed through the skin of the grape and into the pulp of the berry. And as you ferment, these chemicals bind to sugar. So when you're tasting fruit, you don't really get any sense of smoke taint because there's so much sugar there. It's only after the sugar turns into alcohol and the wines become dry that these chemicals, methyl glycol, syringol, unbind and are free within the fluid of the wine. And if there is a problem, and it's a matter of perception, just like most things. If Brett contamination is too low for people to perceive, you're not going to get Brett, even though there may be Brett in the wine. Same with this. If these chemicals come in under perceptive value, perceiving value in terms of parts per billion, then you're not going to experience that. But we won't really know until the wines are dry. We set samples up to a lab called ETS in St. Helena, as is every other winery in California. We were in line with 4,500 other samples, and we just got notification that if we sent in wine samples today, we'd get an answer on November 18th, which is a little past the time where we need to make a decision about harvesting. So a little bit about, this is kind of a faith-based decision-making process in a way for us. We're going to be bringing fruit in for the first time from Napa, Cabernet from Napa on Saturday, Mourvedre or Monastrell from Lodi for the second time early next week. And we've gotten in one red fruit, one Sangiovese so far, a couple of rosés and whites. So we're working our way through this. We're optimistic that we're going to be fine, but we will certainly, you're not going to taste smoke-tainted wine from the Lineage collection. We are not going to release wines that are perceptibly smoke-tainted. You deserve more than that. We deserve more than that. We will certainly keep you up to date, but we won't know the answer to what the effects really are in our wines for the next several weeks. So Rosie, the 19 Sakau smells like a bouquet of roses. It is extremely perfumed, isn't it? There's an orange peel aspect, a citrusy aspect to that wine that's a little mystifying to me right now. And the 18 Gilmedi tastes, or the 19 Gilmedi tastes much more like Gilmedi and much more like Cabernet Franc to me than Sakau. And then Bob and Julie, Rob and Julie, both 18s are great on their own, but they are fun to blend. 50-50, 33-66, and 66-33. So what was your favorite?
Yeah, I want to know what the best
Tell us what your favorite is. So getting into 19 vintage. As you're certainly all aware at this point in time, the 17 vintage is, I'll speak for myself, but I think that my compatriots here would agree, finest vintage in 25 years for me. This is my 25th anniversary of making wine in Livermore. The 17 vintage is so far, the vintage of my career here in the Valley. The 18 vintage was delicious, not quite as big as 17, a little bit leaner in certain regards, certainly from a Cabernet Franc standpoint. We'll talk about the 17 Cab Franc toward the end because that's all Gilmedi, and I think showing some really beautiful things right now. But the 18, a little bit leaner in some respects. 19 to me seemed more like 17 in terms of overall seems, not seem, because we're in barrel for another year. Seems more like 17 in terms of overall heft to the wine. And as I taste 19 Gilmedi Cab Franc, definitely a less herbal driven aromatics than 18. But you can just kind of smell the overall richness of the wine. And in the mouth, the wine is significantly richer than it is in 18 as well. So I look at 19 as being more similar to 17 than 18 was. Interestingly enough, though, for me, as I taste it again now, there is a floral component. There's like a rose hip kind of note in that 19 Gilmedi as well. Not nearly the same perfume as the 19 Sakau, but it's there too. And it's really pleasing. And the wine's got beautiful acid to it right now too. So that I'm very excited about where 19 is headed and think it's going to be a great accompaniment to some really gorgeous Merlot and Cabernet Sauvignon as I'm thinking about kind of lineage blend in my head. Go ahead.
I'm curious to see too how the 2019 Sakau will be in a year, knowing how the 2018 was a year ago and even 6 months ago. So that one seems to kind of around the kind of 2-year mark really kind of come to its own. Your dad's on. Your dad is on.
My father has joined us. Dad, if you can hear us, thank you for joining us. 5th generation of the Mirasu family involved in the wine business. Nicole, thank you so much for being here and for all your support too. Really appreciate it. If you're on, Dad, mute yourself. Let us know what you're thinking of the wines.
Unmute?
Did I say mute yourself? I've become an expert lip reader, so mute yourself and I'll tell everybody what you said, how much you like the wines. Unmute yourself and tell us yourself. Definitely not enough wine yet today.
You know?
No. Does anybody else have any questions or comments about the wines at this point? Anybody else doing blending of the wines? We have any other secret blends? Blood oranges, yes, absolutely. Can you raise that a little bit? Suzanne, congratulations on your anniversary. Happy anniversary, Suzanne. Really appreciate you spending some of that time with us. That's fantastic. Thank you. I really like the Gilmedi, the 19 Gilmedi nose is so beautiful. God. Don't be afraid to make noise. The wine in your mouth. Get air into that wine. 19's got a really beautiful edge. We like the so the 66 Gilmetti and 33 Sockau.
Nice.
Very cool.
That sounds like a
That does
That
sound
sounds
great.
In fact, is this my white wine glass?
Yeah.
All right.
Where do you want me to go, Ralph? Jonathan?
No, he wants the bottles of the birdie. You are an expert in
1,
this.
2, 3.
This is very
This
scientific.
is how we do everything. It's a count. It's exactly the same every single time.
That's not bartenders.
1, 2. All right. So we've got a 60-40 blend of Gilmetti to Sockau for 18. So I like this wine a lot in the nose, and what I like about it is that the Sockau, which to me doesn't have the same intensity of aromatics, has calmed down is the wrong word. Has lightened a little bit the intensity, leavened the intensity of the green aspects, the herbal aspects of the 18. The nose from Sockau always gives me an expectation of what the flavors and body will be. Rosy, yeah, amen to that. I mean, we generally are looking at hoping that what you're tasting doesn't stray too far away from what you're smelling. When I write my notes, the kind of way that I go through the process is I'm smelling for kind of darkness of fruit, levels of darkness. It's red, it's dark, it's black. Sometimes it's blue, depending upon variety, but mostly it's sort of those three things. It's an overall sense of richness and kind of sort of overall richness, I guess is the best way of saying kind of aromatically what it is. And then I look to kind of how much wood impact is there. I generally don't try to write a bunch of different descriptors, because the way I look at this exercise is that I'm writing notes just for the wine for me. I taste differently than everybody else. Aiden does that. We all taste differently than everybody else. We smell differently. We taste differently. And so I don't want to intrude upon someone's personal experience with the wine. Texture is a little bit easier to communicate with each other. Describing what the color orange looks like is very difficult. Same thing with the way things smell and taste. That's up to you to explore and to discover. Talking about acidity and the astringency of wines is much easier than that's kind of something we can all understand. Gilmetti nose fools you. It makes me think the wine will meet my expectations, but ends up being what I never expected. Interesting. What vintage is that, 18 or 19? Or both? Cool. Interesting. I like that blend. A 60-40 blend is nice. You would guess sort kind of if you add something that's a little bit less acidic, a little bit rounder and bigger to something that's more acidic, that you get somewhere in the middle. And you do, not necessarily in the middle, but there's a neat kind of an enrichening of the wine that Gilmetti, that Sockau adds to it. So the question is, will these end up in BDX? God, that's like a tailor-made fastball for.
Thank you, John.
Thank you, John,
So much
for allowing us to move into talking about Little
Tee it
Chicote
up.
here in a few minutes.
To tee it up.
To tee it up, as it were. Before we talk about where these wines are going to end up, let's talk a little bit about the 17. Do you all have comments about how much, whether you like 17, how much, if you like it? 100% Gilmetti Cab Franc.
This is John and Betsy, and we love the 17, but I have a question for you regarding the 2019, because looking at the 2017, it says on the back of the bottle it comes from Gilmetti Vineyard. And are you going to release the Cab Franc from both vineyards, the Sockau and the Gilmetti, for 2018?
You know, that's a great question. And we're going to answer that question in a little bit. I'm going to tease this. So we're going to go to commercial break first. So, because we believe in Cabernet Franc so fervently with respect to just how beautiful the variety is and how beautiful this growing area is for the variety, we have, the three of us have created a new project that is a single vineyard Cabernet Franc project, very high end, very small production. And it's going to start with a 17 vintage, actually. It'll start with about 40 cases each of Guillemette and Saccal Vineyard Cab Franc. A project that we're calling L'Autre Côte, the other shore, the other bank, kind of a play on the left bank, right bank kind of concept. We can give you just a quick kind of a hit at sort of what the package looks like. We're not quite finished with it, but L'Autre Côte will be a blend of 95% Cab Franc and 5% Merlot from 17. And the 17 Merlot is the finest Merlot we've ever made. And that's why it's so prevalent in the 17 lineage, which received 100 points, as you're aware. The 5% that it adds to the 17 Cab Franc from both vineyards is stunning. These are big wines. These are gorgeous wines. I'm so excited about these wines being released. They'll be released in March of next year. We will be talking to you more about what that means in the second half of October. After Lineage gets released, we'll send some information out to you about what L'Autre Côte is as a program. And so the answer to your question is yes. We're going to start with 17. And 18 and 19 will have both of those vineyards as well. And in 2020, knock on wood, we're going to be getting some Cabernet Franc from the Santa Cruz Mountains from a vineyard called Bates Ranch. We'll be getting Cabernet and Cabernet Franc. It is like Brigadoon, this vineyard. It is just so incredibly beautiful and lovely. And we're so excited about this spot and about the wines that we're going to be able to make from the fruit there, that we will have a third single vineyard Cab Franc in the program from, in this case, from outside of Livermore Valley, but will show again kind of a very beautiful facet of Cab Franc and how different it can be based upon where it's grown. So we're extremely excited about this program. I've been dying to reveal more and more about it, but we'll talk a lot more about this over the course of the next several months.
Well, and to go along with that as well, just from a seller standpoint, to kind of give you the smallness of this project, the 2017 Cab Franc that you guys have right now, we pulled 2 barrels aside of that Guillemette Cab Franc because they were just stunning and gorgeous, and we wanted to do something special with them. That's kind of where this whole project started, is being able to say, hey, these are 2 really, really special barrels that kind of deserve something different. And then for Saccal, like Stephen said, we have 3 barrels from 2017. 1 barrel went into Lineage, and these other 2 barrels deserve something, a very special project of their own. So these are really small lots, beautiful wines, and we're excited to share them with you.
We have, Al mentioned that he thought that Merlot would add something significant to these wines, and it does. We get 3 or 4 tons of Merlot from Guillemette at this point in time, and when it's great, it's awesome, as it was in 17.
It's my favorite wine, like ever.
Unbelievable. I'm so excited about that wine.
I'll be talking about that wine for like 10 years.
It's just a beautiful vintage. The 19 Merlot it is beautiful as well. 18 is showing really, really nicely. We have Merlot in Punchin too, don't we?
Yes.
Right? So we have a little bit more of an acid-driven Merlot as part of our single vineyards, our BDX program. And then we do barrel selections from the barrique the regular size barrels for L'Autre Côte. I'm glad the folks who mentioned they really like the 17 Cab Franc. I really love this wine a lot. This is 100% Cab Franc, all Guillemette vineyard. Love this vintage. Love the role this played in the 17 lineage as well, even though it was much smaller than we thought it was going to be when we finalized the blend. There's a heft to it, a richness to it, without being ponderous, without sort of relegating the acidity, without having too big a version of Cab Franc that then tastes like a less good Cabernet Sauvignon, as opposed to a really good Cabernet Franc. Someone was asking a question about the excessive heat early in the vintage.
That was Jeff, I think.
So the heat, we generally get a heat spike right around Labor Day. If you remember back, I can't remember, I think it was 17, we had to cancel the Harvest Festival because it was like 100 million degrees. And we did have very high temperatures. In fact, I was out of town in the Southwest, in Phoenix, where it was 112, and I heard it was 117 here.
Yeah.
So the only time I would ever wish to be in Phoenix rather than in Northern California.
No shade here, Arizona.
At that time of year. No shade for anybody in Arizona. But generally the way that we deal with that, and from a grape growing standpoint, is after 90 degrees, 92, 93, 94, the vines shut down also. They don't like wind, they don't like excessive heat. So they tend to shut down, and they're not photosynthesizing. So they're not really increasing sugar in the standard way that we would like them to. And we water a lot going into these heat events so that the vines remain healthy, they remain hydrated, they remain humid in the fruit zone so that we don't get too much evaporation in that area where the fruit is. We don't expect there to be much in terms of maturation and growth of that fruit. We're surviving, we're in survival mode, basically. So we add a lot of extra water, kind of watering in a few days before it gets really hot, so the vine has a chance to uptake that water, and which will migrate eventually to the fruit. So that, again, kind of once we're out of that program, we get back to our regular watering schedule, and we tend to go through these things pretty well. If we were in an area where we were dry farming, it would be a real problem. Peanut gallery. Please. Are you the peanut gallery? The whole peanut gallery. Can we talk about the Cab Franc being fruit forward, but still allows for great acidity and tannins throughout? Is there a particular vintage, or just as a variety?
The variety itself.
The variety itself. So, one of our favorite people, and one of our favorite cooks in the valley, Alexis Posada, who's going to be making dinner for us here down the road. And asked a question about the fruit forward quality of Cab Franc as a variety. And I think that it does tend to be more fruit forward than Cabernet Sauvignon, in part because it's not as big in terms of tannin as Cab is. But it's not kind of tutti fruity. You know, there's a structure to it. There's a seriousness to it when it's done well. And I look at that fruit being less fruity than acid-driven freshness. If that makes any sense to you.
What I was going to say is the acid still carries on from mid to back to finish.
Yes.
The fruit's up front, but then everything from the back just lingers
Right.
beautifully,
Right.
elegantly.
Right. Absolutely. And it's a different kind of matrix
Right.
in Cabernet Sauvignon. It's much more transparent. It's much more. There's a sense of freshness and vitality to the wine, even when it's slightly bigger than what it might be with the 18 vintage, for instance, Guillemette. Amy and Steve Marino, hi guys, thanks for joining us. It's a challenge to find 100% Cab Franc in California.
It's crying shame.
You guys, do you have any thoughts on that, guys? No.
Cab Franc is typically used as a blending grape. You know what I mean? It's not. So hopefully, well, we believe that what we have here lends itself to a higher end project like the Butcher Coat. So, and we want to showcase that. So,
Great answer. I historically, Cab Franc has been a blender in Bordeaux, and a lot of what has happened in California, especially 60s and 70s, has been let's look to the mother country, as it were, for the model for what we're doing in California. And although the French will call their wines after places and not grapes, while California calls their wines after grapes and not places necessarily, there is a sense that Cab Franc isn't worthy of being there on its own, right? That it's not big enough in body, it's not blah blah blah. All that's bullshit. Excuse my French. Really good Cabernet Franc is a gorgeous piece.
and complex.
Incredibly complex. And when you add a little bit of Merlot to it, or a little bit of Cabernet Sauvignon to it,
I gotta start working on the broth.
add that sense of structure to the wines that apparently we have our first Lotra Coat allocation member. Thank you, John Brady. Thank you. Can't wait to pour the wine for you. Hey, Dan, I can see the top of your head. Move your camera a little bit.
Hi.
Thank you for joining us. There he is in all his glory. Can you unmute yourself?
What? Can you hear me?
No.
Oh,
Yeah.
sorry.
I can unmute myself.
There you go.
There we go.
Well done. Well, hi, Mom. How you doing? Well played, guys. Thanks for joining us.
You betcha. Thank you.
Do you have the wines?
Of course we have the wines.
Stephen, this is John Smugareski. Thank you very much for acknowledging that. I'm here with Rosie, of course, and Renee.
Go ahead, Brian.
He's talking to that other guy. Go ahead, John.
This is John Smugareski. Is that the John you're wanting to hear?
You are the John to whom we are referring.
I want to say you're very welcome for me to join. I'm happy that I was the first one. I just said to Rosie, I bet I'm going to get an email back saying, I'm sorry, John, you're number 51. But,
you're in single digits, John.
thank you.
So much your enthusiasm. And,
Are you muted again?
we're gonna be very welcome. Thank you very much. So hey, Dad, what do you think about the wines?
I like the wines. I like the 18s a lot. They've changed a lot since they've set in the glass a while, which you'd expect from young wines. But all in all, I really like them all. And the 2017 is drinking really nicely.
What to talk to our group of friends here about how, what one ought to perceive from wines like the 19 vintage that have only been in barrel for 12 months. How much change should people expect over time, do you think?
Well, they're missing at this stage of the game a couple of elements. The maturation that you get by being in a barrel number one and the addition of wood number two. So you're adding a couple of more components to what you're tasting right now. And it's interesting because when you taste these wines after they've been in the barrel for another year, you're probably going to find out that the one that you're saying, might have been thin and didn't have the complexity, turns out to be the one with the complexity. I mean, that's the great thing about wines is, and the great challenge for the winemaker is that it's always different, it's always changing, and you never really know exactly what it's going to be.
Absolutely.
I don't know if this is pulling the curtain back too much. Don't pay attention to the man behind the curtain. But we actually tackled the 18 lineage blend at one point and then circled back to it after a while. And we were doing these blind. So the blend that we kind of discovered was very different than the blend that we were thinking we were going to go in directionally our first round through. So with even just that, extra bit of barrel age, it dramatically changed the wines.
It's funny because the attitude that one brings to wine tasting dramatically affect what it is you're tasting. And when we're deep into blending mode, we're meeting every day, we're tasting through 20 or 30 different barrels, and I see myself tasting things day 3 or 4 than I did in day 1 or 2. It's just there is a kind of sensorial, that's an actual word, sensory overload you get sometimes, especially with tannin, with big tannic wines that are that affects the way you taste things from one day to another. Janice, one of our team members, asked about the Brix levels of Cab Franc and made mention of the fact that when she sees Cab Franc on a wine list, she gravitates to that variety. And I'm the same way, Janice. When I see Cab Franc on a list, because of the earlier question about not seeing a lot of varietal Cab Franc out there, I love to see what's happening out in the world. There's a Cab Franc, we call it a Cab Franc beauty show because it's not really a contest so much, of Cab Franc from all over the world that will be happening in November. And we were involved in last year's show that was the first one that they did. But Michael Kelly, one of our club members and friends, who's been a Livermore guy for a long time and now out of the area, is putting this show on and is getting Cab Francs from the Midwest, from Michigan, from the East Coast, from Virginia, and the North Fork of Long Island, and from Canada. So it's going to be very exciting to see, the worldwide variety and expression of Cabernet Franc. And just to answer Janice's question, we're looking to harvest Cab Franc in sort of the 23.5 to 24 range. And depending upon the year and depending upon flavor, it may be a little bit lower than that. We don't really look at numbers as much as we're looking at the way that the fruit tastes as we're walking through vineyards. I was in Napa today, walking through the vineyard and grabbing sample of the fruit we're getting from Napa, and I got the numbers back. And the numbers are used in a confirmatory way. I taste for texture, acidity, sweetness, overall development of the fruit, and then we put the wine in for lab analysis. Those numbers confirm or don't confirm what we're tasting, but we're always making our picking decisions based on what we taste, not what the numbers say. I didn't see it, Rebecca. Do you want to hold that?
Debbie and Kevin just had it with Pachi's Pizza, and
Oh.
it was delicious. And I'm jealous right now because that sounds amazing. Verona, oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Fire.
Absolutely. Thanks, guy. Thanks, Debbie and Kevin, for joining us tonight. We appreciate it.
5 Lotre Coat members.
5 Lotre Coat members. That's awesome. Thank you guys
Thank
so
you, guys.
much.
Thank you.
Really appreciate that. We're looking forward to releasing that wine and tasting with you. I think we're probably, kind of through the overall discussion and kind of talking about what we wanted to, what we're looking for with Cab Franc. Be happy to take any kind of last questions, comments. Did anyone? What's your kind of overall favorite of the wines on the mat right now?
Steven? Steven, it's Tiffany.
Hi. Hey, how are you?
I'm good. How are you? I'm good. I'm good. So, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, we can hear.
So I just want to say that the reason I joined Stephen Kent way back when it was Stephen Kent is because of Cab Franc. So when I saw that this tasting was happening, it's like, I can't miss this. And you did not disappoint again and again and again. But I am going to tell you something. I feel like the 2019s were just a bit more fruit forward than what I prefer, and the 18s were more my style.
So I do not disagree with you at this moment, but as my father kind of mentioned, I think that we're going to see over the course of the next 12 months, más o menos, 9 to 12 months, a lot more development in terms of complexity of aroma and flavor, and kind of a sharpening or polishing of the texture of the wines.
Right.
We use a lot of new oak on these wines. So these wines are changed by having more wood oaky sweetness to them, or more cloves, cinnamon, cedary kind of notes to them. They're going to change more in terms of kind of the micro-oxidative effect of barrel. So as air gets into these wines, they're going to polish and add a lot to the overall sense of kind of playful fruit as it exists right now.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of 18 to 24 months, especially when you're only using about 25% new barrel.
Mm-hmm.
To really get to a point where the fruit has been lassoed, as it were, a little bit, and it becomes more of a structural and more acid-driven exercise. I think your observation is exactly right on at this moment.
So is this new membership?
I think I feel a little differently about the wines, and we'll probably do this tasting again.
I was gonna say, we have to do this again.
Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think that would be great, and I love this. And I'm going to tell you, no matter what you do, Stephen, I'm in. So you can do anything, and I'm in.
Is the new club a new membership? Is that a new club?
We love you guys very much, and
Stephen, Stephen, can you hear me?
yes.
Yes, this is Tom again. Stephen, I understand. Cab Franc and Bordeaux is a blending wine. If you want the real thing, you got to go to the Loire, and we have. And I got to tell you, I've gotten my hands on as many Chinon as I can, from whatever Total Wine has to offer, or even sitting at an airport at Charles de Gaulle. But I have never tasted Cab Franc that comes close to what you make. So I just got to tell you that what the world needs now is more Cab Franc and less Zinfandel. And my hat's off to you, because you're going to turn this, you're going to give this varietal the attention that it deserves.
We are incredibly gratified that you all are here. And for those who are celebrating birthdays and anniversaries, happy birthday, happy anniversary, Rob. Happy 50th.
Happy 50th, right?
Birthday.
Thanks for giving time.
Yeah, thank you so much. Congratulations. And the 50s, the decade of the 50s is a really good one. I'm going through it my second time. I'm midway through mine, and I really like it a lot. So congratulations, and thank you so much for being with us. Really appreciate it.
Stephen, from John and Betsy, we would love to see what you could do with a Zinfandel.
Oh yeah, challenge accepted. We try and rein the aliens, Mom, not like.
I think that there's this vision just popped into my head. My team, I'm a scuba diver, and my team is below me in the water, adding weight to my legs to keep me down rather than lifting me up with all these different varieties that we should be doing. You have to talk to the 7th generation about Zinfandel, because that will be a grape that if we ever do it again, we've done it in the past. If you like Zinfandel, God bless. I mean, there's a wine for everybody. And Beth needs to do some. Okay, well,
it's a new project, Beth.
Yeah. So after Beth has a chance to do and the rest of us get a chance to do some Gamay from Oregon.
Yes.
Which is hopefully our next.
We're throwing that out in the universe to make it happen.
Yes, we're throwing out in the universe.
Manifestation 2020.
There you go. We were going to go to the Gamay Festival in Oregon this year, but COVID happened.
Yeah.
Hopefully next year. Gamay, if you've ever had Beaujolais, really good Beaujolais, Gamay is one of those amazing varieties that we would really love to work with. It's a cool climate grape, like where you would grow Pinot Noir, so not something we grow here in Livermore, but something we're intensely interested in working with. Just as we're intensely interested in working with Cabernet Franc from the Santa Cruz Mountains and from other places that that it grows really well in. So you should expect to see some more Cab Francs coming on down the line. Some white grapes too. We're looking to do some Melon de Bourgogne, which is Muscadet, that we might be able to get from Monterey County. There's some things we're working on. So stay tuned.
Yeah.
But Cab Franc is definitely going to be one of the stars of the portfolio moving forward. No question about that.
Stephen, this is John Smuggeressi. In my early days of membership in your club, one of the first wines I tasted was something you called Zintanga.
Oh, yes.
I love that so much, and you must remember that every single time when I came to a release party, I asked you the question, and it was like, I can't tell you what the answer really why, John, but it's not happening. That's I understood why, and I liked Cabernet Franc at the time, and since the Cabernet Franc came into view there as a focus, perfectly happy with your decision to go with the Cab Franc instead of the Zinfandel.
I appreciate the support, my friend.
As much as your palate has evolved over time, I don't think as it pertains to Zinfandel, you've changed your mind much on revisiting that chapter.
No, interestingly enough, that the vineyard we got that fruit from doesn't exist anymore. It's actually, most of you have been to the site. There's a fallow piece of ground just on the other side of our fence line. That's where the Zinfandel for Zintanga came from. It was the, what was the name of the family? I'll think of it in a second. The owner of the vineyard didn't have any heirs. His nephews acquired the property. And the Wentys were able to plant some of it for myriad as well, fruit, but there's a lot of ground there that is still fallow. We did get Zin one year, 2001 vintage. Zintanga was the name. My sister made a clay mask that had a tongue hanging out, and I very artistically painted the word Zin on the tongue, and that's why it became Zintanga. It was a clone circle release, and it was actually it was like 17% alcohol, which is something that we would never do again, obviously.
That'll make you say Tonga.
Yeah, Tonga is kind of what you did after. Oh, there you go. What's the matter? There it is, right there. There's Zintanga. There you go. This is what I look like after a bottle of Zintanga. And so
Hey, Stephen.
Artwork for the label. God, look at that. Our stage master. So that was Zin, and we have not done a varietal Zin since. We've used Zin as a blender in certain cases, but probably not again. Yes.
Riboli.
Rescue me from the Zin conversation.
Did you hear you?
Did you hear me?
Yes. No. Go ahead. Ask again.
Riboli.
Thank you.
Oh,
Riboli.
Gotcha.
The Riboli family own that piece of vineyard there. They still do, but it's probably not going to be replanted.
You don't think so?
And not from what conversations I've had with folks at this point in time. There's water. There's no water there right now. In that section right there, so it's an irrigation issue, and there's not an ability to get a long-term contract on the ground. So you're going to spend a lot of money to plant it. You want to be able to use this thing, right? Which is just this piece right here. The interesting part of the history of this site where we are is this used to be the old Wegener estate back in the 1870s, and the vineyard actually extended all the way out to Mines Road. So the piece that's being used for myriad as well now, and the piece that is our home ranch, and the piece that's fallow used to be all one contiguous vineyard, about 90 acres, back in the 1870s. And over time, it got subdivided and sold and all, various different things. So we are where we are right now. Yes?
What was the original varietals planted on that site?
The old kind of way of doing California blends of 20 different grapes, all planted there, all harvested at the same time. Petite Syrah, Zin, Cab, Abercrombie Boucher, all those kinds of things that made a field blend of wine, basically. Well, we have some comments of Vincere, thank you. Vincere is a blend of Cabernet Sauvignon and Sangiovese, which we will continue to make. Home ranch, been making that wine for nearly 20 years. A wine we're excited about, a wine that will have increasing importance for us as we move down the road. And the two grapes that I think work really well together. Any last questions before we sign off for the evening? And I just want to thank you guys again so much for being with us and for working your way through the initial issues with Wi-Fi or whatever we have here. I want to say thank you to my co-hosts, lovely people, and for my my team, our team that you can't see but behind the screen, Nancy Castro, our sales and marketing director, Matt and Rebecca Day Toomey, who are our social media experts, Sharon Congdon, Amber Naku, who are new hospitality liaison for us that a lot of our lineage collectors have met and will continue. And Alexis Posada, our guest, our special guest.
Our independent consultant.
Alexis was allowed to stay because he bought some Shoshana Montrachet for us. So thank you very much for that, Alexis.
That's the entrance fee.
And that's the entrance fee. So now you bring your like a bottle of wine, you can come and drink with us. So I just want to say thank you and good night to all of you. And for those who have joined L'Autre Côte already, gosh, thank you so much. We're really happy about that, excited about the wines. Go ahead. If you have questions before we thank you guys.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers to you all.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Cheers to.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you.
Chin chin,
Oh,
chin chin,
beautiful.
chin
Very
chin.
nice. Good job. All of them are excellent.
Best wine day ever.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our video 17 is wonderful.
Hey, they're both on. Cheers.
Here we cheers too.
Cheers too.
More than happy.
Cheers.
Cheers. Love you guys. Thank you, Aiden.
All the people.
Hi all.
Cool.
You know.
Cheers.
Cheers.